Been a while since you were in Soho Square, several generations at least. Last night you came back to London for the first time in a long time, and here you are again, homing instinct not gone anyway. You entered the city from the north, and you were on your last legs. You'd walked most of the M1 and your throat was dry and your eyes watered. You only paused when you'd crossed the North Circular onto the Heath, brow of the hill, and thought of Dick Whittington. The sky was starting to get less dark, and the lights of the cranes rebuilding the city below were pale pink against the sky. Then, past the closed tube stations, tracing the Northern Line above ground down to King's Cross, then south down Judd Street, the Brunswick Centre, Russell Square, closed Pretz, mouth of the underpass, Royal Courts of Justice, the river, Waterloo, Lower Marsh, Lambeth, Kennington, where a fox stopped and you stopped, and it looked right at you, exactly the way these people passing don't. You must have stood for a while staring because a squirrel ran up your leg. A voice from a car said, "Must have thought you was a tree." When you got to the familiar, unfamiliar house, you found the key behind the drain pipe behind the hedge. The sheets had changed since you were here last, but when you woke up after a heavy, short sleep, it was with the old feeling of just making it to the beach in time, having been swimming all night. You climbed ashore and made toast with marmalade you found in the fridge, plenty of it, not like the little oblongs from service stations, and outside the sycamores swayed, bigger than they used to be, and the sun ran up the Victorian terrace opposite. You thought, as you drank your second cup of tea at the familiar, unfamiliar kitchen table, who or where is this? Where's the nearest policeman? The closest high point where I can wait to be found at this fate? And when's it my turn on whack-a-mole? Out of habit, you put your shoes on and went out. It was only once you'd left the house that you realised you didn't have anywhere you had to be. On the Victoria line, people pressed up against you and their reflections bounced off the black windows between stations. Looking at yourself in the glass, you thought, how is it your face never grew up? Other people's faces on the tube seem older than yours, but yours must be older than all of theirs. But theirs are proper and set and that way for life. A poster above them says, "Don't have time to be ill," and an asterisk says, "See a GP today for £75. So you came here. When your parents first moved to London, they lived in that room, second floor from the top of the building opposite, third window from the left. You can see it between the leaves of the trees, and they stayed for longer than they'd planned. That room will have gone now, the walls knocked through and open-planned out into offices. But in the days when you'd stand at the window, London was being rebuilt, like it's always being rebuilt. But back then it was because of holes in the streets. You remember the room, but it's hard to disentangle the furniture. You remember the feel of the floorboards on your elbows, and the mid-morning hush when your father was out and your mother would silent pad about doing jobs for the landlady downstairs. There's something grey about the memory, the dead matter clogging your ankles as you wade into this past that is both right here and right not here. Or is it the layers of dust and dirt that silt you up as you press further back in time? Soot greyed out the buildings back then, accumulated over centuries, but now all cleaned up and white windowsills picked out. The geometry unchanged, but the fronts of these buildings scrubbed into grinning faces. You pick some of the grime from the tube out of your nose. There are pieces of conversation that stick their tongues into your ears from that time, so that you have to shake your head to let the grey stuff settle again and try to see clearly. Right now are high-vis jacket men, trees mottling patchy grass, a sprinkler, pigeons, no starlings, fag ends and seeds trodden into the grooves, bins emptying, dog there, time being killed, duck rap, newspapers, phones out. In general, the streets are much busier these days than they were then, but fewer animals and children and less manure heaped up against the church, St. Pat's, than there used to be. On the road, a woman checks her hair in a brass panel. People slide past that man's sign, pretending not to read it. Black and white hut, unchanged, of course, too. And Charles II still standing there. During the war, they made the cellar under the black and white hut into an air raid shelter. It had been an above-ground entrance to the electrical company, but it could fit about 200 people if you squeezed in. The tunnels under here thread out in all directions, and the basements of these buildings join up underground, so that some nights in the pitch black during a raid, and after the war too, when you could still get down there, you'd occasionally smell incense, faintly, and realise you must have wandered out of the electrical company and into the church catacombs. And back in that room up there in 1940, there's a white tablecloth on the bedside table that was actually a tea chest, and a lamp that works on it. You close your eyes, and the room isn't dusty. No skirting board, but there's a cartoon mouse hole someone has drawn onto the wall with permanent marker, you or one before you. There's a clock that occasionally stops, but when it does, a cartoon mouse comes out of the hole and winds it up again. It has enormous ears like a Prohibition Mickey Mouse made for sarsaparilla adverts. Its nose curves upwards too much, and although it doesn't speak, you know that if it did, its voice would be wrong. And that's about as early as you've got, you think, in terms of memory. So you open your eyes, and over the way from you on a bench is a bloke eating a sandwich who knows none of this, but plenty of his own. And you're thirsty, and you've got places to be, or haven't, and it's good to have met you anyway. A boy stumbles into the square, 10 years old, but a face like an 80-something. He winks at you.